I'm Susan, 32. I walked into my parents' house to pick up my kids and heard my mother say, "The siblings' kids eat first, and mine wait for scraps." Jamie and Tyler sat in the corner, staring sadly at empty plates, while my sister Jessica's children ate seconds. "Get used to it," Jessica told my babies. "You were born to get leftovers." My father nodded. "They need to learn their place." I didn't say anything. I collected my children and left. But over the next few weeks, what I discovered and what I did made them scream in desperation. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I got to that breaking point. For 8 years of marriage, I had been gradually becoming my family's primary financial support, and I didn't realize how deep it had gotten until it was too late. It started small when I got my first real job at 17. Mom asked me to contribute to household expenses, which seemed reasonable. $20 here, $50 there. But as my income grew through college and into my career, so did their requests. What I didn't understand then was that I was being carefully groomed as their financial solution. When I married Marcus and we both had good jobs, the requests escalated strategically. They always came with just enough guilt and just enough genuine need to make saying no impossible. "Susan, honey, your father needs dental work," Mom would say. "Insurance doesn't cover it all, and you know how he is about spending money on himself. $1,000. "Susan, Jessica's car broke down and she needs it for work," Dad would plead. "She's already struggling as a single mom. $2,000 for repairs." "Susan, we need help with the roof before winter," they'd explain together, producing contractor estimates and worried expressions. "We hate to ask, but we don't have options. $5,000. I paid it all. Every single request. Because I loved them and because helping family felt right. What I didn't track was how the amounts kept growing, how my successful career made me an increasingly attractive target for larger emergencies. The pattern was insidious. When Marcus and I needed help moving, they were all busy with prior commitments. When I had surgery and needed someone to watch the kids, Jessica couldn't get time off work. When we asked them to babysit for our anniversary, suddenly everyone had scheduling conflicts. But when they needed money, I was the first person they called. And I always said yes. Marcus tried gently pointing out the imbalance. "Babe, when's the last time they offered to help us with anything?" But I defended them. Family dynamics are complicated, I'd say. They show love differently. They're just not demonstrative people. What I couldn't see was the bigger picture that Marcus was slowly piecing together. The subtle comments about mixed-race children. The way conversations grew awkward when he entered rooms. The questions about whether our kids would fit in socially. I missed it all because I was too focused on being the good daughter, the reliable sister, the family success story who could afford to help everyone else achieve stability. The day everything started unraveling began normally enough. I had a client meeting that ran late, so I called Mom to ask if she could keep Jamie and Tyler until evening. She agreed, which should have been my first warning sign. Mom rarely volunteered for extra time with my children, though she'd never admit that openly. When I pulled into their driveway at 6:30, I could hear children's voices from inside, but something felt different. The sound was segregated. Some voices from the dining room, others from what sounded like the kitchen area. I used my key and opened the door to find Jessica's twins, Madison and Connor, seated properly at the dining table with full plates and tall glasses of milk. My children sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor near the doorway, sharing what looked like peanut butter sandwiches and watching their cousins eat what smelled like homemade spaghetti. "Oh, good, you're here," Mom said, "Mamo," barely glancing up from clearing Madison's empty plate. "We were just finishing dinner." I took in the scene slowly. Jessica lounged comfortably at the table, scrolling through her phone while her children enjoyed their second helpings. Dad sat in his recliner with a plate on his lap, watching TV. The division was clear. Some children were dining, others were being fed. "Jamie, Tyler, how was your day?" I asked, kneeling down to their level. "Fine," Jamie said quietly. He was 8 years old and already learning to minimize his feelings. "Did you have fun playing with your cousins?" Tyler, who was 6 and hadn't yet mastered social diplomacy, shook his head. They were busy with different stuff. I looked around the room again, noticing details I'd somehow missed in previous visits. The way my children instinctively positioned themselves apart from the main family activity. The way Jessica's kids seemed comfortable treating the house as their domain while mine acted like cautious guests. "What did everyone have for dinner?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Mom made spaghetti," Madison announced proudly. "It was really good," Connor added. "And what did you boys have?" Sandwiches, Tyler said matter-of-factly. Grandma said there wasn't enough spaghetti for everyone. I looked at the kitchen counter, where a large pot still sat with what appeared to be substantial leftovers, enough spaghetti to feed several more people. Actually, I said, standing up, why don't we make you guys some real dinner before we head home? Oh, Susan, they're fine, Mom said quickly. Children don't need much. They said they weren't that hungry anyway. But I knew my children. Tyler was always hungry, and Jamie never turned down his grandmother's cooking unless something was wrong. They both looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. They looked emotionally drained. I think I'll make them some plates anyway, I said, moving toward the stove. There's really no need to dirty more dishes, Jessica said without looking up from her phone. They ate. Kids don't need full meals every time they're here. Kids, not your children, or Jamie and Tyler. Just generic kids who apparently deserved less consideration than her own children. I heated up generous portions of spaghetti and watched my children's faces light up in a way that confirmed they'd been genuinely hungry. Not just snack hungry, but truly needing a proper meal. While they ate, I tried to piece together what had really happened during their day with their grandparents. So what did everyone do today? I asked casually. We watched TV mostly, Jamie said between bites. Any games? Any playing outside? The cousins exchanged glances before Madison answered. We played video games upstairs. That sounds fun. Did Jamie and Tyler play too? Silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. The upstairs games are for older kids, Connor finally said, though he was only a year older than Jamie. I see. And what about outside? It's such a beautiful day. We played in the backyard for a while, Jessica said, still focused on her phone. But you know how it is with mixed groups. Different interests, different comfort levels. Different comfort levels. The phrase hung in the air with implications I was just beginning to understand. Comfort levels? I asked. Oh, you know, Mom interjected quickly. Different ages, different personalities. Some children are more social, others are quieter. But Tyler was one of the most social children I'd ever met, and Jamie was only quiet when he felt unwelcome somewhere. Well, I said, I'm sure they'll have more fun next time once everyone gets to know each other better. Another awkward silence. Actually, Jessica said, setting her phone down, we might be pretty busy over the next few weekends. Summer activities, you know. Summer activities that apparently didn't include my children. Like what? Pool parties, neighborhood barbecues. Lots of social events. That sounds great. The boys love swimming and barbecues. Dad cleared his throat. Well, some of these events are specific to certain social circles. Long-standing neighborhood traditions. Traditions that my children weren't welcome at, apparently. I see. I was beginning to see quite clearly. And these traditions don't typically include families that might not fit the traditional demographic, Mom finished delicately. There it was, wrapped in polite language, but unmistakable in meaning. My children weren't welcome at neighborhood events because they were visibly mixed race, and my family was going along with that exclusion rather than fighting for their grandchildren's inclusion. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. What do you mean? Jessica asked, but her guilty expression gave away that she knew exactly what I meant. How long have you been making decisions about what my children can and cannot participate in based on how they look? Susan, you're misunderstanding, Dad said. We're just trying to navigate social situations realistically. Realistically. As if accepting discrimination against 8- and 6-year-old children was the reasonable approach. Have you ever experienced family members treating your children differently because of their race? How did you handle discovering that the people you trusted were part of the problem? Drop a comment below because what I discovered next was even worse. I was processing this revelation when Tyler tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, can we go home now? The quiet resignation in his voice broke my heart. My 6-year-old shouldn't sound like he expected disappointment. Neither of my children should act like they were imposing on their own grandparents. Yes. Sweetheart, we're leaving soon, I said, helping him finish his spaghetti. Susan, don't make this bigger than it is, Mom said. We're just trying to help the boys understand how social situations work. By excluding them? By preparing them for reality, Dad corrected. The world isn't always inclusive. Better they learn that in a safe environment. Safe environment. They thought teaching my children to expect less was keeping them safe. And you think their grandparents' house should be the place where they learn they're not welcome? That's not what we're saying, Jessica protested. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds like you're telling me that my children should get used to being excluded from family activities because some neighbors might be uncomfortable with their existence. We're not excluding them from family activities, Mom said. This is about outside events. Events that you attend with Jessica's children, but not mine. That's different. Madison and Connor fit naturally into the social groups we move in. Fit naturally, while my children didn't. I looked at Jamie and Tyler, who were listening to this conversation with the careful attention children give to discussions about their own worth. They were learning, in real time, that their own family considered them a social liability. "Come on, boys, get your backpacks." "Susan, don't leave angry," Mom pleaded. "We can discuss this." "Discuss what? How you think my children deserve different treatment than their cousins? How you think it's acceptable to teach them that they should expect less because of who their father is?" The room went quiet. Even Madison and Connor, who'd been chattering throughout dinner, stopped talking. "We love those boys," Mom said weakly. "Do you? When's the last time you came to Tyler's soccer game? When's the last time you asked about Jamie's art project? When's the last time you called just to talk to them, not to ask me for help with bills?" They couldn't answer because we all knew the truth. Their relationship with my children had always been secondary to their relationship with my bank account. "This is ridiculous," Jessica said, standing up. "You're acting like we're terrible people because we're honest about social realities." "I'm acting like a mother whose children are being treated as less important than their cousins by their own family." "No one said they were less important," Dad protested. "You just spent 20 minutes explaining why they can't participate in the same activities as Madison and Connor. How is that not treating them as less important?" I helped my children gather their things, my hands shaking with controlled anger. "Where are you going?" Jessica demanded. "Home. To people who think my children are worthy of the same consideration as everyone else." The car ride home was heavy with unspoken questions. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at my boys, both staring out their windows with the contemplative silence of children processing adult behavior they don't fully understand yet. Finally, Tyler spoke. "Mom, why can't we go to the pool parties?" I'd been dreading this question, hoping they hadn't fully grasped the implications of the conversation they'd witnessed. "Because some people aren't ready to welcome everyone yet, sweetheart. Because we look different from Madison and Connor." The directness of his 6-year-old observation hit me like a physical blow. He already understood more than I'd realized. "Yes, baby. Some people have small minds about differences." "Jamie," my 8-year-old philosopher spoke up. "Is it because Dad is black and you're white?" "That's part of it, yes." "Does Dad know that Grandma and Grandpa think we're different?" I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, considering how much truth I should share with children this young. But they'd already heard enough to draw their own conclusions. "Dad knows that some people in the world might treat you differently because of how you look. That's why he and I work so hard to make sure you know how special and valuable and wonderful you are. But Grandma and Grandpa are supposed to think we're special too," Tyler said. "Yes, they are." "Do they?" I sat in the car, looking at my beautiful children who were asking questions no child should have to ask, and realized I didn't have a good answer. Because the evidence suggested that my parents saw my children as complications rather than gifts. Marcus was in the kitchen when we came in, and he took one look at my face and immediately knew something significant had happened. "Rough afternoon?" he asked carefully. "We need to talk," I said, nodding toward the boys, "after they're settled." But Jamie, with the devastating honesty of childhood, walked straight to his father and said, "Dad, Grandpa says we can't go to neighborhood parties because people aren't comfortable with mixed kids." Marcus's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. His expression cycled through hurt, anger, and something that looked like resigned confirmation. "Did he say that exactly?" "He said they needed to prepare us for reality because the world isn't inclusive," I said. Marcus set his mug down carefully. "And Mom agreed with this?" "She said it was about helping them understand how social situations work, by excluding them from social situations." "Exactly." Marcus knelt down to the boys' eye level. "How do you two feel about what they said?" "Confused," Jamie said. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Mad," Tyler added. "It's not fair. You're both absolutely right. You didn't do anything wrong, and it's not fair. And you know what? When people treat you unfairly because of how you look, that tells you something important about them, not about you." "What does it tell us?" Jamie asked. "It tells you they're not as smart or as loving as they should be. And it tells you that you deserve to be around people who are." After the boys went to bed, Marcus and I had the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. "How long have you known?" I asked as we sat on the couch with tea. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've suspected for a long time that your family wasn't entirely comfortable with our marriage. But I hoped I was wrong, or that it would get better after the boys were born." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I know how much you love your family." And because I kept thinking maybe if I just proved myself enough, worked hard enough, was successful enough, they'd come around. I thought about all the times Marcus had quietly endured awkward family gatherings, polite but distant conversations, the subtle way my family never quite included him in planning or decision-making. "Susan," he said gently, "this isn't new. It's just more obvious now that the boys are old enough to notice." "What do you mean?" "I mean your mother once asked me privately if I was sure I could provide properly for you. Your father suggested we wait several more years before having children to make sure we were compatible long-term. Jessica once asked if I worried about raising mixed children in a challenging social environment. Each revelation felt like a small betrayal." "When did she ask you that?" "Tyler's 5th birthday party. She framed it like she was being thoughtful, asking about challenges we might face." I stared at him, realizing how much he'd been protecting me from, how much casual racism he'd absorbed without complaint because he didn't want to force me to choose between him and my family. I should have seen it. "You saw what you needed to see to maintain your relationship with them. There's nothing wrong with that. But now that the boys are old enough to understand what's happening, we have to make different choices." "What kind of choices?" Marcus took my hand. "We have to decide whether we're going to keep exposing our children to people who think they're less worthy of love and inclusion because of their race." The answer should have been obvious, but it meant acknowledging that the family I'd been supporting emotionally and financially for years had been systematically devaluing my children. "There's something else," I said. "Something I need to figure out." "What?" I pulled out my laptop and opened my banking app, something I'd been avoiding because I preferred not to think too hard about money flowing out of our accounts. "I need to understand how much I've been giving them." As the numbers loaded, Marcus looked over my shoulder. We both went quiet as the pattern became clear. "Susan," he said finally, "this is substantial money. The last 3 years showed $47,000 in transfers to various family members. Mortgage assistance, car payments, emergency medical bills, home repairs, loan repayments. It's gotten bigger as my salary increased," I said, clicking through older records. 5 years ago, it was smaller amounts, but more frequent. Going back further revealed the progression. What started as occasional help had evolved into systematic support. Over 8 years, the total was staggering. "They've been living partially on our income," Marcus said quietly, "and treating our children like second-class citizens." I closed the laptop and looked at my husband. "What do you think we should do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I think we need to protect our family. Our real family." "What does that look like?" "It looks like establishing boundaries. It looks like prioritizing the people who actually love and respect all 4 of us. And it looks like teaching our boys that they don't have to accept less than they deserve from anyone, including relatives." I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. The desperate need to maintain family peace was being replaced by a fiercer need to protect my children from people who saw them as problems to be managed. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time my family learned what happens when you take the people funding your lifestyle for granted." Marcus smiled, but it was a serious smile. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking they're about to discover what their lives look like without my financial support." What I did next changed everything. The next morning, I called in a personal day at work. While Marcus took the boys to school, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began systematically reviewing 8 years of financial decisions that I'd never analyzed as a pattern. The numbers were worse than I'd initially calculated. Not just the direct transfers, but the loans that were never repaid, the temporary help that became permanent, the increasing frequency of emergencies that somehow always coincided with my salary increases or bonuses. My phone rang around 10 a.m. "Mom." "Susan, honey, I've been thinking about yesterday. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "Have you?" "I want you to know that we love you and the boys more than anything. If we said something that seemed hurtful, that wasn't our intention." The careful non-apology hung in the air. Not we were wrong or we're sorry, just if you misunderstood our perfectly reasonable position. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think Jamie and Tyler are your grandchildren in the same way Madison and Connor are?" A pause. Too long of a pause. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course they are." "Then why don't you treat them the same way?" "Susan, we do treat them the same. If you think otherwise, you're misreading the situation." I made a decision that would prove crucial later. Instead of arguing over the phone, I decided to hear their honest opinions when they thought I wasn't listening. "You know what, Mom? You're probably right. I was probably just tired yesterday and reading too much into things." "Oh, good," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I knew you'd come around. You're always so reasonable. Reasonable. Code for manageable. Actually, I was thinking of stopping by later to apologize for overreacting. That would be wonderful, dear. Jessica will be here too. We can clear the air. Perfect. I drove to their house around noon, parking down the street instead of in the driveway. I used my key to enter through the back door, moving quietly through the mudroom toward the sound of voices in the kitchen. What I heard made my blood freeze. I can't believe she made such a drama out of nothing, Jessica was saying, acting like we're monsters because we're realistic about social situations. The boys need to understand how the world works, Dad replied. Better they learn now than get their hopes up and be disappointed later. Exactly, Mom agreed. Susan's always been idealistic. She thinks love conquers everything, but that's not realistic with mixed children. The thing is, Jessica continued, my kids' friends from school were going to be at that pool party. I can't have them asking uncomfortable questions about why Jamie and Tyler look nothing like the rest of our family. It puts us in awkward positions, Mom said with a sigh. The neighbors already notice. What do they say? Jessica asked. Oh, the usual concerns. Whether Susan knew what she was getting into. Whether those boys will have behavioral issues as they get older. People worry about mixed children having identity problems. My hands were shaking with fury, but I forced myself to keep listening. Well, Dad said, at least we don't have to worry about Susan staying mad long term. She always comes back when we need her, especially for money matters. She's too soft-hearted, Mom agreed. Remember when she was upset about the car loan? She got over it and ended up covering the insurance too. Susan's our safety net. Jessica laughed. She might pout for a week, but she'll be back with her checkbook. Then came the words that would be burned into my memory forever. The thing is, Mom said casually, the siblings' children eat first, and mine wait for scraps. That's just how it has to be with mixed families. The normal-looking children get priority. Right, Jessica agreed. And honestly, the sooner Jamie and Tyler get used to it, the better. They were born to get leftovers socially, within the family, everywhere. It's just reality. They need to learn their place. Dad added matter-of-factly. We're doing them a favor by teaching them early. I stood in that back hallway, listening to my family discuss my children like they were defective products that needed to be hidden from view. Not grandchildren to be protected and celebrated, but embarrassments to be managed and minimized. That's when the last piece of my old self died, and something harder was born. I walked into the kitchen, and the conversation stopped abruptly. 3 guilty faces turned toward me. Susan, Mom said brightly, her tone completely different. You're early. I was just telling Jessica how much we enjoyed having the boys yesterday. The audacity was breathtaking. After listening to them systematically dehumanize my children, she was pretending to be the loving grandmother. Were you? I said flatly. Yes. They're such good boys. So well-behaved and polite. I looked between the 3 of them, memorizing their faces, their expressions, the casual way they'd been discussing my children's inferior worth. I came to get Tyler's water bottle. I lied smoothly. He forgot it yesterday. Oh, of course. Let me help you find it, Mom offered, bustling around with fake helpfulness. I retrieved Tyler's water bottle from the counter and turned back to face them. Actually, I said calmly, I heard your conversation just now. The color drained from their faces. What conversation? Mom asked weakly. The one where you explained that mixed children should expect scraps while normal-looking children get priority. Dead silence. The one where you discussed how my children were born to get leftovers. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. The one where you agreed that they need to learn their place. Susan, Dad said carefully, you're taking things out of context. Am I? What context makes it acceptable to say that my 6- and 8-year-old children deserve less than their cousins because of their race? We never said that, Mom protested. You said it exactly. I heard every word. I looked at each of them in turn. But what really struck me was the part about me being your safety net. Your reliable ATM who always comes back with her checkbook. That's not, Jessica began. Isn't it? How much money have I given this family over the past 8 years? They exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question. We're family, Dad said. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right. Family does help each other. But here's the thing about family. They also love and protect each other's children. They don't teach those children to expect discrimination from their own relatives. I walked toward the door, then turned back. I'm going to give you some time to think about what you heard yourself say today. About whether you can live with treating my children as less worthy than Jessica's. About whether your financial comfort is worth more than your grandchildren's emotional well-being. Susan, wait, Mom called. We'll talk again soon, I said, when you're ready to be honest about whether you actually want my children in your lives or just my money. Over the next week, I made a series of phone calls that would fundamentally alter my family's lifestyle. I started with my accountant, whom I'd been meaning to consult about our family's financial planning. I need to understand the full scope of financial support I've been providing to extended family members, I explained. We can definitely analyze that. Do you have records of transfers and payments? 8 years worth. When she called back 2 days later with her analysis, even I was shocked. Susan, you've provided $127,000 in documented financial support over 8 years. That's not including gifts or informal assistance that weren't recorded. The number was staggering. That was a house down payment. College funds for both boys. The European vacation Marcus and I had talked about for years. What would you recommend to someone in my situation? Financially speaking, immediate cessation of support. You're subsidizing other adults' lifestyles at the expense of your own family's long-term security. And if I wanted to recover some of these funds, that would depend on documentation. Were these gifts or loans? I thought about years of conversations. Promises to pay you back when we get on our feet. Assurances that it was just temporary help. Repeated requests that came with implied repayment agreements. Mixed. Some were explicitly loans. Then you have options. But the bigger question is whether pursuing repayment is worth the emotional cost. She was right. I wasn't interested in chasing money from people who'd shown their true feelings about my family. I was interested in removing their financial incentive to pretend they wanted us around. Next call, family lawyer, recommended by a colleague. I need to understand my obligations regarding financial support I've been providing to family members. Are these court-ordered obligations? Elderly parents who need care? No. Voluntary support that's become expected and increasingly demanded. Then you have no legal obligation to continue. Any money you've given was your choice, and stopping is equally your choice. What if they've structured their lives around expecting this support? That's their problem to solve. You're not required to maintain other adults financially unless there's a specific legal agreement. That evening, Marcus and I had another crucial conversation. I want to cut off all financial support, I told him. All of it. Immediately. Marcus nodded slowly. I think that's right. But are you prepared for the fallout? What kind of fallout? Susan, you're talking about removing substantial support from people who've come to see it as guaranteed income. They're going to be desperate. They're going to say and do things to try to maintain their lifestyle. He was right, but I was past caring about their comfort. Let me ask you something, I said. If strangers treated our children the way my family treats them, what would you want me to do? Cut contact immediately. Then why should relatives get different treatment? They shouldn't. The next morning, I began the systematic dismantling of my family's financial safety net. First, I called the mortgage company where I was listed as a co-borrower on my parents' loan. I need to understand my options for removing myself from this mortgage. You'd need the other borrowers to qualify for refinancing without your income, or the loan would need to be paid off. And if they can't qualify on their own, then they'd typically need to sell to pay off the remaining balance, or find another qualified co-borrower. How long does the refinancing process typically take? 60 to 90 days, depending on their financial situation and credit. Perfect. That gave them time to understand the reality of their situation without my support. Next, I canceled all automatic transfers from my accounts to theirs. The mortgage assistance, emergency fund contributions, insurance payments, all of it stopped. I called Jessica's auto lender where I was a co-signer. I want to ensure that no refinancing or additional credit can be extended without my explicit written consent. We can add that notation to your account. By afternoon, I'd systematically removed myself from their financial ecosystem while giving them enough time to understand what was happening and make alternative arrangements. Then I waited. The first call came that evening. Dad. Susan, sweetheart, there seems to be some kind of banking error. Our mortgage assistance didn't transfer this month. There's no error. Dad. What do you mean? I mean, I canceled the automatic transfer. Silence. Then, can you elaborate on why you'd do that? Because I'm no longer comfortable subsidizing people who think my children deserve less than their cousins. Susan, if this is about that conversation you think you heard, Dad? I heard exactly what I heard. Mom said mixed children should expect scraps while normal-looking children get priority. You agreed that my boys need to learn their place. More silence. We can discuss this, he said finally. Work something out. What's to discuss? Either you think my children are worthy of the same love and respect as Jessica's, or you don't. Of course we do. Then prove it. Start treating them that way. Stop making excuses for excluding them from family activities. Stop teaching them to expect less from life because of their race. Susan, you're being unreasonable. I'm being a mother. The mortgage help stops. The emergency fund stops. All of it stops until you figure out how to be proper grandparents to all your grandchildren. I ended the call before he could argue further. 20 minutes later, Jessica called. Susan, what the hell is going on? Dad called me panicking about the mortgage. I canceled my financial support. You can't do that. They depend on that money. Then they shouldn't have spent an hour discussing how my children are social liabilities who need to learn their place. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you said. I heard every word. Jessica's voice turned pleading. Look, maybe we could have phrased things better. But you can't destroy Mom and Dad's financial security over a misunderstanding. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply stopping my subsidization of people who think my husband was a mistake and my children are problems. We never said that. You said my children were born to get leftovers. You said normal-looking children get priority. You said they need to learn their place. Which part am I misremembering? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You have 90 days to figure out how to live on your actual incomes. No more mortgage help, no more car payments, no more emergency loans. If you can convince me that you genuinely want my children in your lives, not my money, but my children, then we can rebuild a relationship. Susan, please. We can work this out. Can we? Because I've been trying to work things out for 8 years, and my children are still sitting on floors while their cousins eat at tables. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching people reveal their true priorities. Mom called crying, explaining how they'd structured their budget around my assistance and couldn't possibly manage without it. When I suggested they might need to downsize to a home they could actually afford, she said I was being vindictive and cruel. Jessica called multiple times, alternating between anger and desperation. Her car payment was $389 monthly, which represented nearly a quarter of her part-time boutique salary. You're going to ruin my credit score, she accused, as if her financial planning was my responsibility. Dad tried a different approach, showing up at my house unannounced. Susan, we need to talk about this reasonably. I'm happy to talk reasonably about when you plan to start treating my children with the same consideration you show Jessica's. We do treat them the same? Dad, you literally said they need to learn their place because they're mixed race. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He struggled for an answer, and I realized he couldn't explain it in a way that didn't sound racist because it was racist. Look, he said finally, maybe we've been insensitive, but destroying our financial stability isn't the answer. I'm not destroying anything. I'm stopping my participation in funding people who don't respect my family. We do respect your family. Show me. Invite Jamie and Tyler to everything you invite Madison and Connor to. Stop making excuses about social situations. Treat them like the grandchildren they are instead of problems to be managed. And if we do that, the financial support comes back. The fact that his first concern was money told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. Dad, if you genuinely change how you treat my children, if you start acting like a grandfather who loves and values them, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But the days of me paying people to tolerate my family are over. By week 4, the desperation was setting in. My parents had put their house on the market. Jessica had started working additional hours and was looking for a second job. The comfortable lifestyle I'd been unknowingly subsidizing was crumbling. That's when they decided to try a different strategy. Mom called with a proposal. Susan, we've been thinking. What if we set up regular family dinners where everyone is treated equally? What would that look like? Well, every Sunday, all the grandchildren come over. Same activities for everyone. Same dinner for everyone. It sounded promising until she continued. And maybe, while we're rebuilding trust, you could at least help with essential expenses. Just the mortgage, so we don't lose the house. There it was. The performance of change in exchange for continued financial support. Mom, here's what I've learned. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed me that you think my children deserve less than their cousins. Everything that's happened since then has been you trying to minimize that reality so you can keep my money. That's not true, isn't it? You're not calling because you miss Jamie and Tyler. You're calling because you miss my financial contributions. We miss all of you. Then prove it. Spend time with my children without asking for money. Show genuine interest in their lives without trying to negotiate financial support. Act like grandparents who love them, not people who tolerate them for profit. 6 months later, I was loading the dishwasher after Sunday dinner when Marcus showed me a text he'd received. Your dad wants to meet for coffee, he said. Just the two of them. Says he wants to apologize properly. This was new. In 8 years of marriage, my father had never initiated one-on-one time with Marcus. What do you think? I asked. I think it's worth hearing what he has to say. 2 days later, Marcus came home from that coffee meeting with a complicated expression. How did it go? He apologized. Actually apologized, not just expressed regret that I was offended. For what specifically? For treating me like an outsider. For making assumptions about our children. For participating in conversations about whether they belonged in family activities. I studied Marcus's face. Do you believe him? I think he's scared. They lost the house, Susan. They're renting a small apartment now. Jessica's working 2 jobs and had to sell her car. They're learning what their lives look like without your financial support. Good, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. But I also think he's genuinely reflecting on some things. He asked about Jamie's art projects. He wanted to know about Tyler's soccer season. He seemed different. That evening, Mom called. Susan, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that we're in family counseling. Are you? We're learning about unconscious bias and how our behavior affected you and the boys. We're trying to understand how we got to this point. I waited, curious whether this would lead to another request for financial assistance. I don't expect you to forgive us immediately, she continued, but I wanted you to know that we're working on becoming the kind of grandparents Jamie and Tyler deserve. What does that look like? It looks like admitting that we were wrong. About the pool parties. About the dinner arrangements. About all of it. It looks like learning to confront our own prejudices instead of expecting children to accommodate them. For the first time in our conversation, she sounded genuine rather than strategic. Mom, I need you to understand something. The money is never coming back. Regardless of what changes you make, I will never again subsidize this family financially. I understand. Do you? Because every previous conversation has eventually turned into a request for assistance. This family has to learn to live within our means. That's our responsibility, not yours. It was the first time I'd ever heard her acknowledge that. If you want a relationship with Jamie and Tyler, I continued, it has to be because you value them, not because you're hoping to eventually restore financial support. I do value them. I know it doesn't look that way, but I do. Then show them. Not me, them. Be the grandmother they need, not the one you've been. 3 months later, we had our first family dinner in almost a year. Not at their house. They didn't have space in their small apartment. At a restaurant where everyone paid for their own meals. I watched carefully as my parents interacted with all 4 grandchildren. They asked Jamie about his latest art project and actually listened to his explanation. They cheered when Tyler described his soccer team's winning streak. They included both boys equally in conversations and activities. It wasn't perfect. Years of learned behavior don't disappear overnight, but it was different. Better. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Mom pulled me aside. Susan, I want you to know that losing your financial support was the best thing that could have happened to us. How do you figure? Because it forced us to examine why we were willing to risk losing you and the boys. It made us realize that we'd been prioritizing comfort over family, money over love. I looked at her, searching for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. The boys still ask why they don't see you more often, I said. Maybe we could change that. Not big family events, just small visits. Getting to know them as individuals. Maybe, I said. As I drove home that night with my family, Tyler asked the question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa different now? What do you think, sweetheart? I think they're trying to be different. Grandpa asked me about my science project and actually listened when I explained it. And how does that make you feel? Good. Like maybe they want to know us, not just see us. From the rearview mirror, I saw Jamie nod in agreement. Marcus reached over and took my hand. Any regrets about how you handled it? I thought about the house my parents lost, the financial stress my decisions had caused, the year of estrangement we'd all endured. Then I thought about my children, who were learning that they didn't have to accept less than they deserved from anyone, including family members who claimed to love them. None, I said. Not a single one. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about protecting your family and setting boundaries with people who don't respect your worth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that hurts the people you care about most. Remember, you teach people how to treat you and your family. Never accept less than full respect and inclusion for your children.